Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today what we are going to be going over is the 2020 Senate elections if Joe Biden were to have a landslide victory on the presidential level and seeing what an implication would be like, the implications would be like on the Senate map. So, using the same kind of numbers that I used in my presidential landslide prediction, I'm going to be adding 8 points to Joe Biden's current lead in the 538 forecast, which is about 8 points already, to kind of match up with the recent CNN poll, which had Joe Biden up by 16 points. In no way or means do I think that that's actually realistic and what is going to happen on Election Day, but it's pretty interesting to look at this kind of scenario and looking at, its implications not only in the Electoral College, but also on the Senate map. So, looking at the safe Republican seats, there actually aren't too many in this map. Idaho is one, along with Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So those are the along with Tennessee and West Virginia. So these are the only Senate seats for the Republicans that are considered safe. And there are a lot of states that you typically would think would go for the Republicans by quite a solid margin. However, they're not characterized. And that's basically what a landslide does. It makes a lot of states that formerly would never be considered competitive. And this kind of builds on the Obama 50-state strategy back in 2008 when they won Senate seats in Louisiana and Montana and, all across the country. I believe they also won one in South Dakota, which is insane. But, yeah. Now we're going to look at the safe Democratic seats, and there are quite a few. This is the biggest category for all of them. So they would include Oregon, New Mexico, Illinois, Minnesota, and Michigan, which is pretty interesting. Michigan considered to be a swing state along with Minnesota this time around, being safe for the Democrats. This includes typical Democratic states such as Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, which already was safe. If you actually look at the current Senate forecast for New Hampshire and the deluxe model, Jeanne Shaheen is projected to win by about 17 points, which is pretty insane considering the fact that back in 2016, the Democrat only won it by about 1,000 votes. So that's a huge shift for the Democrats' favor in the state of New Hampshire. And yeah, these are all of the safe Democratic seats. And that brings the Democrats up to 46 seats already. They're very closely winning majority just with safe seats alone. Now we're going to look at the likely Republican states. And there are only 2 of them. And they are the states of Kentucky and Louisiana. So Kentucky is a little interesting, considering that this would be one of the Democrats' best case scenarios, and the fact that Mitch McConnell is still winning by a likely margin is pretty notable. He's predicted to win it by just under 15 points right now currently. So adding 8 points on top of that would just make it 7, keeping it in a likely characterization. And in the state of Louisiana, probably going to go to Bill Cassidy by a little over 20 points. Adding or subtracting 8 from that is just going to barely put it into the likely margin. I don't think it's really going to be competitive, and if I were the Democrats, I would not invest too much money in the state of Louisiana. Now we're going to look at the likely Democratic seats. There are also quite a few, and quite a few surprises. Arizona, a state trending more Democratic, is likely, along with Colorado. These are both Democratic flips. I believe those are the only Democratic flips so far, yeah. And in addition to that, the state of Maine, a Democratic flip in a state where Susan Collins never really had a close race. She kept constantly and consistently winning by margins of 20, 30, 40 points in the state of Maine, and now she is losing by a likely margin in her home state, which is insane. In the beginning of the year, if you told me that Susan Collins was going to win by such a big margin, I would think you're crazy. But this has definitely turned out to be a huge and crazy year, and these kind of unexpected things can easily happen, and this is why it's completely plausible to see this map. Even though it's not probably likely, we could see it. In addition to the state of Maine, we have the state of Iowa, which is likely. Teresa Greenfield leading by quite a decent margin in recent polls, along with the state of North Carolina. Now, I think that the scandal here with Cal Cunningham and his extramarital affairs is not going to really help him. However, I don't think it's too much of an impact, especially considering that North Carolina voters have already started voting. And I think also the fact that Tom Tillis has coronavirus is definitely not going to play in his favor. I don't mean that in a negative way. I wish him a speedy recovery. However, just seen in the presidential polls, despite the fact that Trump's approval rating has kind of gone up a little bit since he got COVID, his matchups against Joe Biden have consistently been getting worse and worse. And you could attribute that to his comments. However, you could also attribute that to the fact that he is considered a weak leader to some extent. So this already puts the Democrats at a good position. And I haven't even gotten to all this likely Democratic states yet. But the Democrats already win the majority in, a super landslide year, which is, pretty good already. In a Senate map where this is really just an uphill battle because a lot of these seats are solidly Republican seats that they're fighting for. The last likely Democratic seat is Georgia's special election. Now, this might seem a little weird. However, Raphael Warnock has been leading in recent head-to-head matchups or in the jungle primary matchups by quite decent margins, by some in double digits. And I think that if he were to go against Kelly Loeffler, which is pretty likely as of this moment, he would probably win by over 5 points with the additional 8-point average. And I think that that's pretty notable in a state where it's pretty solidly Republican, and the Democrats really haven't had a senator here in decades. So, yeah. Now we're going to go on to the lean Republican states. And there are only 2 of these as well. And it is the states of Texas and Mississippi. So the state of Texas is pretty interesting. It's kind of weird on how this is considered a lean state, even though some people, even without the super, plus 8-point already landslide idea, it's they already rate it as a lean race. I think that with John Cornyn's popularity in the state of Texas, I think it's definitely helping to his advantage, and I think that MJ Hagar, with all due respect, I don't think she's necessarily doing a great job in this race, especially in the state of Texas. I think Joe Biden is more likely to win the state of Texas compared to her, but, anything can still happen. However, it's still a lean race in the state of Mississippi. Pretty close race back in 2018. About 7 points decided it for Sidney Hyde-Smith. I think he's also going to be under 10 points this time around, along within the presidential level. And, could easily be in play. However, still a lean margin for Sidney Hyde-Smith at the end of the day with this landslide idea. Now we're going to look at the lean Democratic states. So these include Georgia's regular election. So John Ossoff is expected to lose currently by just a couple of points. However, with the added 8 points, he's expected to win by just under 5 points. In addition to that, we also have the state of Alabama. So this is a state currently projected to be a Republican flip after he won very unexpectedly in 2017. However, this is a solidly Republican seat, and the fact that the Democrats are still in play here is pretty notable. However, in a landslide election, Doug Jones probably could hold on, and it could be a huge shock to everyone. In addition to that, we have the state of South Carolina, a state where they did not think it would be plausible for them to actually do quite well in this state. However, Jamie Harrison has really been making up the margins, and recent polling has even shown Jamie Harrison in the lead, depending on which poll you look at. So that's pretty notable, and I think that this race is definitely considered a toss-up at this point. In addition to that, we also have the states of Montana and Kansas as leading states. So Barbara Boyer currently leading in polling in the state of Kansas, and could potentially pull it off even without the extra points added. The state of Montana, Steve Daines leading in current polling. However, Steve Bullock is the current governor, and he's quite popular. I think that a lot of governors have been applauded for their COVID relief, and that's just going to benefit them. in their re-election, not only in their re-election campaigns, but I think that for whatever expenditures that they want to do. And I think that, it's definitely benefiting Steve Bullock in this point and could put him over the top, like seen in this map. Yeah, and the final state is going to be the state of Alaska. And this is going to be a tilt Democratic state. So, current polling, we haven't really had too many polls. They've been mainly Democratic pollsters. However, they do have Al Gross ahead, very narrowly, might I add. But I think that this race could be very interesting. Alaska is very difficult to poll. However, Alaska is very difficult to try and predict. So Al Gross is an independent. Alaska really loves their independents and third parties. And I could definitely see Al Gross actually going to the Senate. And with that, the Democrats would have 58 seats, which is insane. And Republicans would have 42. So considering the fact that they still have Lisa Murkowski and potentially Mitt Romney, even if, Donald Trump wins the White House, which is pretty unlikely considering that this is a scenario where Joe Biden wins by 16 points nationwide. Even if Joe Biden were to lose, they're very, very close to a supermajority. And considering the fact that there might be some special elections in the 2022 map, really does favor the Democrats pretty significantly. It's pretty easy to say and look at how the Democrats are really going to be advantageous in these elections. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and thank you so much.